Tale of the Cursed Talisman. Chapter 1. The Whispers of Elysium. In the ancient city of Elysium, where legends whispered through the bustling bazaars and hidden alleyways, there lay a mysterious artifact known as the Cursed Talisman. Its origins were veiled in mystery, but tales of its malevolent power had spread like wildfire among the merchants and adventurers of the land. What price would you pay for unimaginable power? This question echoed through my mind as I wandered the vibrant streets of Elysium. I am Aria, a young and ambitious treasure hunter, always yearning for the thrill of the next big discovery. The idea of wielding such power as the Cursed Talisman ignited a flame within my heart, blinding me to the cautionary tales that echoed through the city. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city, I stumbled upon a dusty, forgotten map in an old bookshop. The map seemed to point to the location of the elusive talisman. My heart pounded with excitement and a little trepidation as I imagined the power it could bring. Ignoring the warnings of the city's elders and wise sages, I decided to embark on a perilous journey to claim the talisman. Chapter 2. The Perilous Journey. The sun blazed overhead, an unrelenting ball of fire that turned the vast expanse of sand into a shimmering sea of heat. Each step I took sank into the burning sand, making progress slow and grueling. My eyes, strained from the glare, squinted to discern the horizon. It felt like an endless trek through a wasteland, each dune blending into the next, offering no respite or relief. My water supply dwindled faster than I anticipated. The leather pouch that had felt heavy when I started now seemed woefully light. Every sip was a battle of will, one part of me screaming to conserve, another desperate to quench the unrelenting thirst. The air was so dry that it seemed to suck the moisture from my very bones, leaving my skin parched and my lips cracked and bleeding. I pressed on, driven by the vision of the talisman, the promise of its power. But the desert had other plans. The first real challenge came when the wind picked up, carrying with it the fine, stinging particles of sand. A sandstorm was brewing. I hastily wrapped my scarf around my face, leaving only a narrow slit for my eyes. The wind roared, and the sand whipped against my exposed skin, a relentless barrage that made every step a painful effort. Visibility dropped to near zero. The world became a swirling mass of yellow and brown, the ground indistinguishable from the sky. I tried to keep moving to maintain my direction, but without landmarks, it was a futile effort. The storm seemed to last an eternity, each minute stretching into hours. I could feel the sand seeping into every crevice of my clothing, rubbing my skin raw. When the storm finally abated, I was left disoriented and exhausted. The once clear path had vanished, replaced by a landscape that looked foreign and hostile. Panic bubbled up, threatening to overtake me, but I forced it down. This was a test, just another obstacle to overcome. I took a moment to gather my bearings, relying on the position of the sun to reorient myself. The next few days were a blur of heat, thirst, and fatigue. I rationed my water even more strictly, but the constant need for hydration was a nagging presence. My food supplies were also running low, the dried meat and hard biscuits doing little to sustain my energy. Each night, I would collapse under the stars, too tired to appreciate their beauty, the cool desert air a brief respite from the daytime inferno. Then came the night terrors. As I lay under the vast sky, strange sounds began to echo through the dunes, howls, whispers, and unidentifiable noises that set my nerves on edge. One night, as the full moon cast an eerie glow over the sands, I woke to find a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. A desert predator, drawn by the scent of my sweat and fear. It was a jackal, lean and hungry. I reached for my knife, the cold metal a small comfort against the primal fear that gripped me. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity before it finally slunk away, leaving me shaken and sleep-deprived. The culmination of my desert trials came when I stumbled upon a chasm, a gaping maw in the earth that stretched as far as I could see in either direction. There was no going around it, and no clear way to cross. I scoured the edges, my heart sinking with each step, until I found a narrow, rickety bridge made of ancient, weathered wood and frayed ropes. It was my only option. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge. It creaked ominously under my weight, swaying with each step. The drop below was dizzying, the shadows deep and foreboding. Halfway across, the wind picked up again, and the bridge began to sway violently. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the ropes, each step a battle against the urge to turn back. But turning back was not an option. With a final desperate lunge, I made it to the other side, collapsing on the solid ground with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The desert had tested me in every possible way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But I had survived. Each challenge had left its mark, etching lines of hardship and determination into my very soul. As I stood up and dusted the sand from my clothes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Cursed Talisman was out there, waiting for me. And I was one step closer to finding it. Chapter 3: The Temple. Finally, after weeks of arduous travel, I reached the ancient temple where the talisman was rumored to be concealed. The temple was a haunting sight, overgrown with vines and surrounded by an eerie silence. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, guided by the map I held tightly in my trembling hands. In the temple's heart, I discovered an ornate pedestal upon which rested the Cursed Talisman, gleaming with an otherworldly light. My breath caught in my throat as I approached it. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, but my ambition clouded my judgment. Gripping the talisman, I felt an electric surge course through my veins, and my power grew exponentially. Chapter 4: The Realization. Exhilarated by my newfound might, I returned to Elysium, now possessing an aura of awe and fear that turned heads wherever I went. But as the days passed, a dark change began to manifest within me. An insatiable hunger for power consumed me, and I grew increasingly ruthless in my pursuit of dominance. My family were the first to notice the transformation. There was fear. The curse was taking hold, and my heart turned cold. My once bright soul began to wither away. The power the Cursed Talisman granted me was intoxicating. Each day, I felt stronger, more capable of bending the world to my will. My vision, once blurred and weak, became sharp and piercing. No longer did I stumble in the dark or strain to see distant horizons. My impulsive nature, however, was a different beast altogether, one that the talisman seemed to amplify rather than quell. Every decision I made was quick, thoughtless, and driven by a newfound thirst for power. The whispers of the talisman filled my mind, feeding my impulses and clouding my judgment. My former friends and allies who once stood by my side began to fear me more and more. I saw it in their eyes, in the way they avoided my gaze and whispered behind my back. One evening, as I brooded in my opulent chambers, surrounded by maps and artifacts, I heard the talisman's whispers grow louder. They spoke of conquest, of domination, of a power that knew no bounds. The voice was both seductive and terrifying, a constant companion that eroded my sense of self. It promised me everything but demanded more than I was willing to give. I tried to resist, to silence the whispers with sheer force of will, but it was like fighting a storm with a feather. The more I struggled, the tighter the talisman's grip became. It fed on my fears, my insecurities, my deepest desires. My impulsive behavior grew more erratic, my actions more ruthless. I began to see enemies where there were none, threats in every shadow. One night, as I stared into the mirror, I barely recognized the person looking back at me. My eyes, once full of hope and ambition, were now cold and calculating. The talisman hung heavy around my neck, its malevolent glow casting an eerie light across my face. I could feel it pulsing with a dark energy, a constant reminder of the power it held over me. I suddenly heard a haunting whisper that seemed to emanate from the talisman itself. The voice, spectral and haunting, spoke of the doom that awaited me, reminding me that power without compassion only led to destruction. In a rare moment of clarity, I realized that I was losing myself. The talisman was not just an artifact, it was a parasite, feeding off my soul. I knew then that I had to rid myself of it, but the thought of giving up that power was almost unbearable. The whispers grew frantic, urging me to reconsider, to embrace the darkness fully. I took a deep breath, trying to drown out the talisman's voice. It felt like tearing a piece of my own flesh, but I managed to pull the talisman from my neck and hold it in my trembling hands. Its cold surface seemed to burn my skin, and the whispers turned into screams of rage and despair. Chapter 5. Back to the Temple. With each step back to the ancient temple, the talisman's hold on me weakened, but the journey was far from easy. The closer I got to the temple, the louder the whispers grew, pleading and threatening in equal measure. My vision blurred again, not from physical weakness, but from the emotional turmoil raging within me. I stumbled and fell countless times, the weight of the talisman almost too much to bear. Memories of the power it had granted me flashed through my mind, each one a temptation to turn back. But with each step, I reminded myself of the person I used to be, the dreams and ambitions I had before the talisman took hold. Finally, I stood before the pedestal where I had first found the talisman. The temple was silent, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I hesitated, the talisman still whispering, promising, threatening. But deep inside, I knew what I had to do. With a final, determined effort, I placed the talisman back on the pedestal. As its light dimmed, the whispers ceased, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. The oppressive energy lifted, and I felt the curse's hold on me weaken, then shatter completely. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted but free. The journey back to Elysium was a time of reflection and healing. I had faced my deepest fears, battled my impulsive nature, and emerged stronger for it. I vowed never to let ambition blind me again, to use my experiences to help others rather than seek power for myself. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. In Elysium, I shared my story, warning others of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the seductive lure of power. Years passed, and I became known not for my ambition, but for my wisdom and compassion. The talisman's curse had taught me a valuable lesson in bravery, not just in facing external threats, but in confronting the internal landmines that had held me back for so long. I had learned to recognize and overcome the fears within me, the doubts that could have easily paralyzed me. The power I had sought was not in the talisman, but in the strength to let it go. I had found true success in understanding that power must be wielded with compassion and humility. The city of Elysium flourished, and I took pride in knowing that my story had contributed to its growth and prosperity. Chapter 7. The Legacy. As I grew older, I found solace in knowing that the legend of the Cursed Talisman had continued to inspire and caution those who heard it. My journey had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of self-awareness. In my final days, I reflected on the path I had taken, the challenges I had overcome, and the lessons I had learned. The talisman had tested me, revealing my deepest fears and weaknesses, but it had also shown me the strength I possessed. I had faced my internal landmines, recognized them for what they were, and emerged victorious. And so the story of Aria, the young and ambitious treasure hunter, lived on in the hearts and minds of Elysium's people, a reminder that true success lies not in the power we seek, but in the courage to confront our fears and the wisdom to use our strengths for the greater good.